Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video we're doing a very impromptu video, where initially the video coming out today was going to be the BB24 cast assessment. However, for some reason the cast isn't coming out until Tuesday. However, interestingly, we did get recent news on the plans for the next season of Australian Survivor, which ends up being Heroes versus Villains. However, not Heroes vs. Villains in the way that we know it from the US, so being a full-blown all-star season, but instead it being a half-and-half season with 6 heroes and 6 villains that are returning players, but also 6 heroes and 6 villains that are newbies, which is bizarre. Now, if you've been following my live streams during it, I've talked pretty confidently for a while now that I did expect the next season of Australian Survivor to have returnees. I did expect it to be probably fans versus favorites, as recently they have been taking a lot of themes from the US, and that felt like a very reasonable theme for them to do next, especially after Blood vs. Water ended up largely underperforming, both ratings-wise and obviously just the reception from the fan base, to where, again, like, I fully expected a season of returnees to kind of bring back some of the audience, but I didn't expect this, which is just weird. Now, this is coming from Redmond, very reliable source on Survivor casting and theme spoilers, so again, this is pretty reliable information here, and again, like, half returnee, half newbie cast, not surprising at all. Even doing it in a way that the tribes are half newbie, half returnees is not that mind-blowing either. What is the fact that they're also attaching the heroes versus villains theme to it, where that just makes this really weird, where you're going to be labeling 6 newbies, these people we haven't seen before, as villains right off the bat, which I do find pretty funny, but also kind of sucks for those villains, considering I feel like they're going to have an unwarranted reputation on them. It really just feels like as if Australian Survivor themselves knew that they didn't have enough people for a full-blown All-Star season at this point, considering they literally just did All-Stars 3 seasons ago, and going back to another All-Star season right away just seems really ridiculous, considering the very limited pool of players they have to pick from, to where even on the original All-Stars, there were some very questionable casting choices there. So like, this seems to be them wanting to do an All-Star season, but realizing they don't have the resources to do it, and instead backing off to a half-and-half season. And really just, again, like, all this just feels weird to me, but here I do want to run through the people that I feel like could be in consideration for this season. Again, these are people that I think production would genuinely look at and would actually genuinely consider, where I will say that most of the returnees from this cast will probably comprise of people from season 6 and 7. However, I do expect some pretty all-star players on here, particularly people that were already on the original All-Stars. As while it does seem ridiculous to have 3-time players by the 8th season of the show, I do suspect that they're going to want to get some of the bigger names there to be able to promote them for the show here. And through that, let's run through the players that I think have a chance of coming back in chronological order, starting off with season 1. It's where someone that I do think is pretty likely to be here is Phoebe, who was obviously a massive star on season 1 and had a kind of middling run on All-Stars. And I do think her to return here would make sense, probably on the heroes side of things. Again, I don't think she's like such a big name to where it feels out of place on a half-and-half season, to where, again, she's been a pre-merge boot 2 times now, but I think she's a good enough player and a good enough get to where it makes sense to me for Phoebe to be on here. It's just a matter of obviously her availability. Next up, we do have someone that I think will be considered, but I don't think this person will say yes, and that person is Nick. Now, obviously, Nick is someone that production seems to love, and I do think they would want Nick for the Villains tribe, him being the first like original villain of Australian Survivor, but I don't think he'll say yes. I do find him to be someone that is kind of unlikely, but I think they'll at least try to get. Next up, we have someone that, again, another person that was on All-Stars. We do have Brooke, and Brooke is someone that I think is a shoo-in for the Heroes tribe. If they can get her, like, I would be surprised if they didn't at least try to get her, considering how good of a run she had on All-Stars and how she kind of became a fan favorite there. I would expect her to be in the running here, and again, it seems like a decent fit for Heroes. Next up's a person that I think would have been a minor consideration had they not just had a child, and that person is Flick. And Flick is someone that was pretty much purpled throughout All-Stars, which is already not a great sign, but was such a big name coming out of season 1 and was a big villain for the show, to where I do think they could have still considered Flick here for the return. However, considering she just recently had a child, I don't know if she would be willing to come back so immediately. So again, someone that I could see production trying to get, but I don't know if they can actually get her. Next up, a person that I think is pretty likely as well. I think this person is someone that I would be surprised if Australian Survivor didn't try to get back at some point, and that person is Lee. And Lee, again, obviously has this heartbreaking exit where he has to leave due to his mother passing during All-Stars, and that is such a tragic way of him leaving, to where I feel like they would really want him back for that storyline, and I feel like he is such a blatant hero due to that storyline, to where, again, I feel like it's a likely return for Lee, though obviously with the limited amount of spots, who really knows? But again, I feel like Lee could be a decent contender here. And the last person from season 1 is the winner in Christy, who I think this is another situation of, I think they'll try to get her. I don't think she'll say yes. I do feel like Christy is kind of done with Survivor. I mean, as we've seen with All-Stars, where she said no to All-Stars, like, I just don't expect Christy to be back at this point, considering it doesn't seem like she has any incentive to go back. And because that, I do think she could be someone that fits maybe on the heroes side of things. I don't think she's someone that is that likely to actually say yes. Well, with that, let's jump into season 2, where I think someone that they'll definitely consider for the heroes, even though I don't personally really want it, and that person's Tarzan. Again, I'm good. I don't need Tarzan back. However, I think 100% they're going to at least call him, and to be honest, he would be a decent fit for the hero tribe. But again, not really someone I'm looking forward to. Also someone that recently came back for Blood versus Water, but I think would be a shoo-in for the Villains tribe if she said yes, and that person is Sam. And again, Sam would be fantastic for the Villains tribe here, having a really, really strong run on Blood versus Water. However, I think more than likely she will say no. I don't think she would want to come back to back. I do think if this was like season 10 or something, I could see Sam accepting it, but at this point, so close to her having this relatively negative experience on Blood versus Water, I just do not think she would actually say yes so quickly. Next up for season 2, we do have AK, who, again, very easy villain, and I think he's someone that is somewhat likely to be on. I think he's someone that would probably say yes. The question is, does production limit him to, again, one of the 3 male villains? I think that might be a little bit harder to see, but I do think he's someone that definitely would be in consideration and someone that I could see back. Also from season 2, we do have Henry, and Henry is someone that I think would probably say yes every time he's called, and I think he's someone that Australian Survivor would call pretty often. I think he's the perfect type of player that you would want, someone that's going to play hard every time he plays and is going to bring entertainment to the show. However, I think in terms of does he fit the cast, I think that might be a bit more of a question mark. I mean, I think he probably lands on villain, but even then, like, he's not locked, but I do think he's someone that I would not be surprised to see considered. Next up, someone that we know turned down the original All-Stars, but someone that could be in consideration here, and that person is Tessa. Where, again, like, just scheduling works out better here. It wouldn't be that surprising for them to call Tessa. Now, I will say that I don't think she necessarily fits the theme that well. I mean, I think she probably would land on the hero side. But even then, like, I don't think it's a super solid fit to where I'm not feeling confident that she's actually going to be on. Next up, we have someone that I'm just kind of hoping is in the running, considering this is a person that I won back for the original All-Star season. However, supposedly they weren't in the running for some reason. However, I just don't understand really why, and that person is Sarah. And again, to me, Sarah is someone that should be a very likely returning. I mean, she's someone that's still in the community. She's someone that demonstrated a lot of potential, and was someone that it seemed like production liked. However, for some reason, she wasn't asked for All-Stars. So again, I'm kind of hoping she would be in the running now, but realistically, I don't know if she fits either hero or villain, but still, I would like to see her back, and I do think there's a non-zero chance of it. Next up, someone that I think would be on every season if they could, and that person is Luke. And again, I think Luke is a shoo-in for the Villains tribe here, or the Hero tribe. He really could go on either. However, the question is, does Luke want to play again? And I think that's the bigger question mark here, to where I just don't know if Luke will say yes, but I do think if he does, I would not be surprised to see him on the cast. Also from season 2, we do have Lockie, who I don't really think fits the theme super well. I mean, he could be a hero, I guess, but I do think he's just someone that Australian Survivor seems to love, that production seems to love, the network seems to love, and because that, I would not be that surprised if he ends up back on our screens for some reason. But again, another one that I'm not looking too forward to it. Next up, we do have someone that I feel a lot less confident about, but I do think they're at least a consideration. That person is Michelle. Now, Michelle, I think, could fit onto the Villains tribe as this, like, kind of snarky, like, Courtney Yates-esque figure. However, I think at the end of the day, I don't really see it happening. I mean, she obviously was on All-Stars. However, I feel like there are just so many other players at this point that production would be looking at over her. But again, I would not be surprised if she's at least in consideration. And last up for this season, we do have the winner of the season in Jericho, who again, I think would be a perfect fit for the Villains. Now, again, do I think it's super likely considering the limited amount of spots? Not really, but again, I think he's at least in consideration. And if he were on the final cast, I wouldn't be that surprised. Next up, moving on to season 3, where we're starting it off with someone that had a pretty mixed return on All-Stars, and that person is Moana. And I think Moana could come back. I am a bit unsure necessarily on where production necessarily stands with her, where obviously she has a decent run on All-Stars. She gets a somewhat decent edit on All-Stars. Yeah, I really don't know if production liked her or not on All-Stars, but I think she's at least someone in consideration, probably for the villain tribe. And also for season 3, we do have another person from All-Stars. We have Lydia, who I personally don't need to see back. I feel like I'm good not seeing Lydia back, but obviously they loved Lydia in the challenges. I think she's a pretty clear hero for the show, and I think she's someone that could come back here. Also, another person that I think could come back, and I think is probably one of the more likely pre-All-Star players to come back, and that person is Matt Rogers. And again, Matt Rogers, obviously massive character for the show, massive player. I think they would definitely want him back, and I think he would probably fit onto the hero side of things. And I think if he were to accept, I think he's probably a shoo-in for this cast here. Next up, we got Benji, who is, again, a very clear villain. I think he would be a great get for the show here. The question is, can they get him? Obviously, they've tried to in the past, unsuccessfully for All-Stars, and rumored to have been in consideration for Blood vs. Water. I just don't know if he's going to say yes. Again, he's been asked 2 times now. I don't know if he's going to accept for Heroes vs. Villains, but again, it would be great if he did. Next up, in our All-Star person, we got Shawnee. And again, I think Shawnee is someone that production clearly likes. Obviously, she got a pretty big edit on All-Stars. Has had 2 really deep runs at this point. I think she'll at least be in consideration, but to be honest, I do feel like she's probably not going to make the final cut, but you never know. Next up, someone that I don't think is actually going to be on, but I feel like I should at least mention this person considering their legacy at this point, and that person is Sharn, who, again, like 2-time runner-up of the show, 2 really deep runs. However, I'm not expecting Sharn to be back here. I do feel like, again, in this limited casting pool, I do feel like Sharn just kind of gets overshadowed when you're only casting 12 people here. And also, I just don't know like how likely it is that Sharn wants to come back either after having 2 very similar runs, but you never know. But again, I'm not really looking at this too confidently. The final person from season 3 is the winner in Shane, where personally, I feel like we've seen what we're going to get from Shane. I feel like Shane's probably an early boot every time she plays moving forward, but she is such a clear hero for the show, considering her Olympic background and obviously the fact that she's a winner. I would not be surprised if she's in consideration here, but again, someone that I don't personally need to see back. Next up for season 4, someone that I think would have probably been a shoo-in for this cast had he not sued production. That person is Ross. And again, I think Ross would have been someone that would have been a likely returnee, but again, obviously is suing production for his injury, and through that, don't think he's super likely. Next up, someone that I think would be hilarious if we get this person back. Immediately after being the first boot on the previous season, we have Andy. And again, Andy being back, 3-time player at this point, after being the first boot his last time around, I think this would be hilarious if Andy were to come back for the season. Again, very clear villain. I think it kind of fits. I think it's a question of, obviously, does production want him back again? And then also, does he want it at this point after 2 really bad runs? But again, I think it would be funny, and I think it would be interesting to see him try to get redemption again here. So I think he would be someone in consideration. Next person, someone that I think is clearly on production's radar, but again, another person that has been saying no, and that person is Sean. And again, Sean said no to All-Stars. Pretty confident he was asked for Blood vs. Water and said no. I don't know if he's going to accept for this, and to be honest, I don't even know if he really solidly fits as a hero or a villain. It's where I guess he's a hero, but like not really that solidly. And I think when we have so many other people to pick from, I don't know if he necessarily fits in there, but I think he's someone that at least will be considered. Next up, someone that will definitely be considered, but I don't think it's super likely to be on, and that person is David. Obviously, massive character, winner of All-Stars, massive legacy, but also feels like a waste to put on a season like this. I think you just wait until the next full-blown All-Star season if you are going to bring back David, but he would perfectly fit the villain tribe. But again, I just feel like it's not really necessary in my eyes. Next up, another person that I personally don't want to see back, but I can definitely see production bringing them back, and that person is John, who, again, don't need him back. I'm good. But I can definitely see production thinking of him as his hero and decide to bring him back, but not someone I'm hoping to see back. Next up, another person that has turned down All-Stars, but you never know if they can come back for this season, and that person is Janine. Now, I think the question here is she a hero or a villain? I don't think she's super solid in either camp, but I do feel like Janine is someone that production clearly wants back at some point. So again, would not be surprised if she's in consideration here. Next up, another person that I think will at least be in consideration is Abby, who obviously had a solid run her first time around, second time played more aggressively. And because, again, I don't know if she's a hero or a villain. I think she could go either way. And realistically, again, I don't think she necessarily fits the theme, but I could definitely see production wanting her back. So I think she'll at least get the call. Next up, massive villain for a show, but also someone that I think is very likely to say no, and that person is Harry. And again, I just think Harry is kind of done. I mean, at least at the time of All Stars, he seemed to be out on the concept of playing again. Now, again, if he wants to play again, I think production would want him back for the Villains Tribe. I think he would be a good fit, but I just don't think it's super likely he says yes. The final person for season 4 is the winner of season 4, and that person is Pia. And again, I think Pia could come back probably as a hero, but another one that I just don't think it's super likely, considering, again, I just feel like there's other more blatant heroes out there, and I just feel like this doesn't really seem like the cast to bring her back in. Again, I feel like you probably just wait for a full-blown All-Star season, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. But as I said, I do think most of the cast will be coming from the last 2 seasons. I think out of the 12 players coming back, I would assume that probably 8, if not more, are from these last 2 seasons. Let's run through these last 2 seasons and the people that I think can come back, starting off with Joey. And I think Joey is a very clear villain here. Joey is someone that for some reason production seems to love. Even JLP mentioned Joey as someone he would love to see come back. I think Joey is pretty much a shoo-in for a return, as long as he doesn't get overshadowed by a certain other player that we'll be talking about later on. Next up is someone that I don't think will return, but I think is someone that they would have wanted to return, and that person is Shannon. And again, Shannon was a pretty massive pre-merge character the first time around. However, she just recently had a child. I don't know if she would want to play again immediately after that, so more than likely she'll turn it down, but again, I think she's someone that would be in consideration. Next up, one of the bigger locks on the board, I think Simon is for sure coming back. Simon is someone that is a massive character on his season, has a massive redemption arc for return, and is also still very prominent in the community, to where I just cannot imagine Simon not being back for this season. The question is he a hero or a villain? I think he really could fit into either, but I think he's someone that production for sure would want back. Next up, someone that would probably lean villain, but isn't a similar mold to Simon, and that person is Emmett. And again, I think Emmett is someone that I could see production coming back. It's not as solid to me as Simon. I think Simon is a much bigger lock, but I definitely think Emmett is in consideration. Obviously, someone that had a deep run, kind of ended up taking charge of his tribe, has a lot of villainous confessionals. I think he's someone that production probably really liked, and through that, would not be surprised to see him back here. Next up, another person that production seemed to like, and that person is Danny, who, again, this one, I don't know exactly where Danny lands, hero or villain. I guess maybe villain due to her aggressive gameplay style, but Danny's another one I think is very likely to return if she ends up saying yes. I think if you're casting from season 6, especially looking for a female villain, I feel like Danny is probably the one you're going to go with. So again, kind of expecting her to be back as well. Also from season 6, probably one of the more clear heroes, and someone that, again, I personally probably don't need to see back, but I think there probably will be back, and that person is Flick. And obviously Flick has this tragic backstory that I think production really liked. And while edit-wise, she definitely was quiet at points, I think by the end of the season, she was looked at as an underdog figure, a heroic figure, and one that I definitely would expect to see back on the Heroes Tribe here. And after that, we have one of the bigger locks on the board if this person says yes, and that is George. And again, if George says yes this season, he is a locked-in person for the Villains Tribe. There is no way George is not on this season if he says yes. The question is he going to say yes? Does he want to play again relatively soon after his season, to where he's going to have a big target on his back? I don't know. But George is for sure going to be in consideration, and I do actually fully expect him to be back here. And then we have the winner, obviously, in Haley, who, should be one of the bigger locks on the board if she wants it. Now, I don't know if she does. And also, to be fair, I don't know how much she really fits within the hero versus villain theme, where she's kind of a mix of both. I think they would put her on hero, but still, I don't think she's clear cut for either one, but really comes down to, does she want to come back? And if I were to guess, I would say no, especially for this style of season, but you never know, and it's definitely someone that I think would definitely be in the running. And with that, let's jump to season 7, where, again, despite how much people criticize how bad the casting was here, I do feel like we're probably going to get a decent amount of returnees from it. In a similar vein to Ross, I do think Sophie would have been someone that would have been in contention to return here, had she not had her social media blow up and it seemed to irritate production after the fact. And if that had not been the case, I think Sophie would have been a clear-cut villain here, but again, more than likely not coming back because of that. I do think a dark horse to return here could be Amy, where Amy was portrayed to be a pretty good player on the season. However, I do think the struggle with her, and really just in general with Blood versus Water, is do you want both loved ones back? And I feel like that's going to be a great factor in whether or not Amy comes back here, as I do feel like her loved one is a bigger lock. One of the bigger locks on the board here, though, is Nina. Again, I think Nina is for sure coming back. They blatantly said Nina is coming back on the season. I think she'll probably be on the Hero Tribe. I think she's pretty likely to be on this season. Next up, the person that it seemed like production really liked. I don't know if I need him back personally, but I do think there's at least a chance of having Croc back. Again, Croc is someone that production really hyped up in the preseason. He was in a lot of the promotional content. Even his blind side was propped up as this massive moment. I definitely think Croc can come back, and is probably more likely to come back than his loved one, despite his loved one being a bigger character, but we will talk about that. Again, another one of the bigger locks on the board, we do have Khan. Again, I fully expect Khan to be back here. I think Khan is someone that production clearly loved, was a massive character. I think the debate is, like, does he really truly fit, like, the villain mold? Where despite him being portrayed on the show in a more devious light, he doesn't really do anything deviously, but I do fully expect him to be back on here. Next up, another one that I think will at least be in consideration, but I think their loved one is much more likely, and that person is Jessie. Again, Jessie has an interesting arc across the season, obviously being betrayed by Sam. I think they could return, especially if Sam ends up coming back. I feel like Jessie would be a really interesting person to bring back, but I think at the end of the day, their loved one is much more likely, and I think more than likely they won't make it on because of that. And with that, let's get into their loved one in Jordy, who is probably the biggest lock on the board. I cannot imagine this season without Jordy. He is for sure going to be on the Villains Tribe. Again, not that I necessarily need it. Like, I feel like I'm fine if Jordy's not on the cast, but I feel like for sure production wants Jordy. I think he for sure fits the Villains Tribe, and I think he for sure wants it. So again, I think Jordy's for sure coming back. Next up is an interesting one, considering how massive a player this person is, but considering how under-edited he is, I do feel like it's a bit more wonky on whether or not he could return. That person is Josh. Obviously, one of the better players of the season, had a lot of control across the season, but also was just severely under-edited for most of the season. And because of that, don't know if production really wants him back, to where, like, I do think the likes of even a Croc is probably more likely than Josh in my eyes, but I would not be opposed to seeing him back here. Also, someone that I think can be a mixed bag on whether or not they return is Shay. Now, obviously, Shay had a pretty bad experience by the end of it. And I think because of that, they could turn it down. But I do think Shay is someone that production seems to be fine with, especially considering the physicality she brings to the show, which I think is something they like to prop up. And because I think she could be a very easy hero. And the final person we're going to be talking about here is another one of the runner-ups here, and that is Chrissy. And again, to me, Chrissy is someone that should be a lock to return. I think the problem here is, does she want it? And I just don't think she'll say yes so soon. Again, to come back immediately after her having a pretty bad experience by the end of it, and her talking about her being traumatized by it, I just cannot imagine her saying yes so quickly. But if she says yes, I do think she's very likely to make it on, considering production seems to obviously very much love her. But do I expect it? Not really. But there we go. I mean, that is every player that I could see being considered for this season. With this being such a limited field, only 12 people, 3 male heroes, 3 male villains, 3 female heroes, 3 female villains. Again, that really limits the field of who they can possibly pick here, to where, again, I would be very surprised if they don't pick from the people I've talked about, but you never know. It's Australian Survivor. Who knows what they're thinking? But with that, I mean, obviously expect a cast reaction once we get a cast down the road. That is if this theme even falls through. For all we know, it falls apart. But obviously, I'll be covering the season when it eventually airs, probably sometime next year, I would guess. And while we're here, I guess I might as well talk about the BB24 situation where, again, the cast is coming out on Tuesday, the day before the premiere, and also the day before a typical video of mine. And obviously, that is a super short turnaround. Again, especially because the cast is more than likely coming out midday. So I will say that I will try to have the BB24 cast assessment out on Wednesday. I cannot guarantee it because that also gives me such a short time frame to get the video put together. But again, I will try. So hopefully that is this Wednesday's video. And if I'm not able to put one together in that short period, then I might just turn it around into a like week 1 power ranking or something similar to that nature, or possibly release it on Thursday to where we won't have a Wednesday video. But again, like, ideally, obviously, we'll get the video out in time, but again, just a little notice that there might be a chance of some weird scheduling moving forward, but gonna try to have it out on Wednesday. But again, those are my thoughts on the theme of Australian Survivor, heroes versus villains, and who I think could be in consideration for the season. Again, really strange that we're getting this, but really excited to talk about it once we eventually do get it. So obviously stay tuned for that. But for now, that's the video. Thank you for watching.